There have been many impacts that have occurred in history about positive and negative effects on imperialism on India and Britain.
There have been many shocking points made in history about the imperialism that took place in Britain and India from 1757 to 1947. Many Indians died during this time, and at least 1 million Indians died and 13 million were displaced. The British came to India for trade and to establish colonies. Britain increased its control of India through the East India Company. It lasted from 1757 to 1947. Britain had no indigenous written language until the 9th century, almost 3,000 years after India. They took over because they had superior weapons, a strong thirst for profit, and confidence. Indians gained a sense of nationalism after Britain took control. The British exploited India's natural resources such as land, minerals, and labor for their benefits. Many Indians died, and also Britain took control because they had better weapons and they had confidence. Britain gave India benefit of land, materials, and many more things.
India had a lot of benefits from imperialism, but there were also a lot of drawbacks to both countries. The British took control of India in 1763 after defeating the French. Imperialism took many good tolls, like India got the education, laws, and the slave trade was ended, and you couldn't take control of slaves anymore. But they also had to give many things to Britain that they needed, like the garden spots where you could grow food all year long, and some of the food that they needed, and some of the spices like pepper, cumin, cinnamon, and more. Britain made trade unsafe as well. Some of the positives that are the civilization and building roads and all the things they needed, like telegraphs, also giving them the benefit of civilization. And sometimes the British can be a blessing or peace and order, and they get more resources for India that they didn't have before. British got rid of slave trade, and they gave back resources that they did not have. They also earned the greatest human blessing, which was like peace to them, and introduced Western education, framing laws, and established courts of justice. They're all benefits because they are all improvements which they did not have before. British live off India, or some of the negatives, and when they go, they carry all they have gained. British occupied all the higher places in every department of government, and natives are deliberately kept out of social institutes. Old Indian industries were broken up, thus the economic development of India was stopped. They provided things for England, the poverty of India grew, and the standard for living fell to very low levels. They also weren't letting them do anything for themselves, and some people wanted to protest for their own people to have a right and a say for their government. Imperialism in India provided goods for Britain and more laws and education for India, and they got the resources that they needed, not for Britain. They needed to keep all the materials for themselves so they can have things that they did not have.
Imperialism took a turn on India and Britain's situation and led to fighting and extreme conflicts and very confrontational conversations. The Britain has ruled India through the Britain East Empire. Imperialism started from 1857 to 1947. This made trade unsafe, unreliable, and expensive. They had to adapt because all the trade routes were unreliable and stick. Some of the positive effects that took place are they got rid of slave trade. They made a law so that you can't own slaves anymore. They made it so that you have more resources and a higher way of thinking. They widened their minds. Their communication got better because they made new machines. So some of the negative effects that developed are the lack of trading. This has taken a turn, especially because they had more resources. There will always be tension between the two because of the terms that were set. They also had no responsibility like little kids. That might seem nice, but when they left, they caused a whole bunch of problems. There have been many good and bad things that have happened over the time, and overall they were exposed to new things.
The imperialism by Britain and India had both its pros and cons for both countries. Some of those pros and cons were that Britain ruled over the government, which helped India so they could get going. But India didn't have any control over it. Gandhi once said imperialism is negation of God. It is ungodly acts in the name of God.